Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league experience. Hello, welcome back to Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league experience. I'm your host, a Big Les. Bit of a special episode today, and we haven't had Isaac on the podcast for a little while, but good to have you back on, brother. How have you been? I know that you're obviously pretty busy at the moment as the page is sort of picking up and everything like that on your end.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you for having me. First off, I'm always happy to kind of come on and chat footy, as you know. Yeah, it's been a hectic little off-season period. We've had stars rumored to go places, stars signed places, and a ton of rumors. A lot's focus around one of the things that we're going to talk about today. There's just been a ton going on, but it's all exciting. And honestly, it's probably the best time to be a rugby league fan, if I'm being honest. Other than the actual season going on, this stuff's really cool to get into as well.
Yeah, 100%, mate, 100%. Look, I guess we should just get straight into it. Rugby 360, I think it is probably the biggest story of the off-season. It's going to be the biggest story of the off-season. People are comparing it to the next Super League and whatnot as well, just with the impact that it could potentially have in regards to attracting NRL players over. Mate, as far as we know now, what is the whole consensus around Rugby 360? Like, what can this competition look like based off what we know now?
Yeah, so the way things are looking now, and I must say, for a competition that has just been non-stop talked about in the media, I'd say honestly about 50% of my stories over the last 2 months, both for Zero Tackle and on my own page, have been focused around R360. There's really not much official information on it, I guess. Similar to like the Perth Bears at the moment, where there's little branding and there's little kind of promotion on that side of things. Rugby 360, by all accounts, it's a real thing. It's a real thing coming October 2nd, 2026. I believe the competition kicks off. So for those of you who don't know, Rugby 360, it's a new rugby competition backed by the Saudis. So there's a ton of money in it. And the big talking point and the big kind of connection between NRL and R360 is the fact that they are looking to poach as many players from the league as possible, most notably our star players. So the big gripe at the moment is the fact that R360 has a ton more money than the NRL has ever had in its history, and definitely has more than it has right now. Which has become a bit of a lure for a lot of these players. Now, as far as I'm aware, they've got enough players signed supposedly for a 6-team competition, and it will officially kick off 12 months from, or 11 months from now, really. And so we've got a few star players that have been linked to the competition, which we'll get a little bit more into later. But yeah, look, it's a massive kind of hurdle for the NRL, and looks to be a major disruption to kind of the recruitment and retention of a lot of these NRL teams.
Well, 100%. And I think the key thing that you sort of brought up there was the money, right? They have a lot more money than everyone else. They can offer players a lot more money than everyone else. And I mean, we've already seen it in the media over the past couple of days. You know, you've got your Lomaxes, you've got your Payne Haas's, and you've got obviously Ryan Pappenhausen, who's sort of up in the air at the moment. Look, I want to touch on Payne Haas first, because I think that one's probably the one that's been most talked about over the last 2 or so days. Talk to me about everything that we know from the Payne Haas situation, maybe if there's a dollar figure offer, what that sort of looks like, and you know, I guess what the discussion has been, if there has been anything out of the Payne Haas camp, and what the information that we know offhand at the moment.
Yeah, look, if there's any superstar in the NRL that you don't want gone, it's Payne Haas. And that's why there has been such kind of an eruption in media with him leaving, or potentially leaving, I should say. So the talk around him at the moment is R360 looking to lure him in on a long-term deal. Now, it's been reported that he has been somewhat uneasy about the decision, not fully convinced that the competition will kick off. To combat that, the R360 have offered him a $3 million upfront payment just to join the league, and then an extra $2 to $3 million per season to remain in their competition. So that has been obviously a massive lure for him to head over to R360. Now, I believe Haas is off contract at the end of 2026. So he is off contract. He is, free to kind of head off to R360 if that's what he wants to do. Now, a lot of the arguments have been that, he's won State of Origin, he's won a premiership, he's won multiple club awards and multiple Prop of the Year awards. He's already one of the greatest forwards of all time, and he's only 25 years old. go make your money now in R360. On the flip side of things, there have been concerns out of Payne Haas's camp that this competition will not actually get off the ground, or if it does, it won't be off the ground for very long, which has kind of struck fear in Payne Haas. And the reason that there's a massive kind of fear looming over his camp is the fact that the NRL have dished out 10-year bans to any agent or player that negotiates or joins R360. So Payne Haas is a little bit worried about that 10-year ban by all reports. So it's really up to him now whether he wants to take the upfront quick money or if he wants to kind of see how things travel over the next few years. But it's a definitely huge talking point if you're a Broncos fan and if you're an NRL fan, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a really interesting watch. It obviously does look like Payne Haas's management looks to be a little bit standoffish, as you say. Talk to me about, I guess, with the agents as well, because I read the media release on the podcast a few weeks ago just to sort of get a little bit more of an idea as to what the bans may look like if they do come into fruition. Do you think, though, like we've heard, obviously, that it's Payne Haas himself that's obviously having a little bit of doubt around the competition if it's going ahead. Do you think it's more so the agents, though, that are pretty, worried about even starting up negotiations with the R360?
Yeah, so quite a few agents were already in talks with R360 prior to the NRL or the ARLC kind of implementing these conditions and policies that you will be banned for a decade, essentially a lifetime ban for an athlete's career if you do negotiate or join R360. Now, from what I've heard and been told, a lot of agents backed out from that. Now, I don't know purely what is coming out of Payne Haas's camp. He has quite a tight-knit camp over there, tight-knit group with his agent and obviously his family as well. From by all reports, Payne Haas is worried for himself in not being able to get back into the NRL should this competition not get off the ground, which was the NRL's kind of goal in setting this 10-year ban. But the agent side of things is very interesting as well. So it's come out that the agents who formally align themselves with R360 will also be banned from negotiating any deals or having any affiliation with NRL players for 10 years, which is obviously a huge deal. Now, we just saw Zach Lomax and Ryan Pappenhausen's agent, who we'll get more into the players later, but their agent recently dropped all negotiations with R360 and has vowed not to negotiate with R360 at any point because he doesn't want to be forced into a 10-year ban from the NRL, which is where he gets majority of his money. So that's a real that was a real wake-up call for a lot of agents, players, and fans that even if players want to make the switch to R360, they need to find an agent who's willing enough to actually cop that ban, for negotiating with R360. So there's definitely fees from players, but surprisingly, agents as well are unwilling to kind of cross that sacred ground.
And like for a rugby point of view as well, is there similar sanctions, or is there any word around similar sanctions? Not so much for players, but for the agents that negotiate. Because I know that from a rugby side of things, that I think it was said that players that negotiate with R360 won't be able to be picked for the Wallabies or the All Blacks. But is there anything from an agent piece for, I guess, the rugby side of things as well?
Yeah, so that's probably the biggest talking point out of the whole, rugby's kind of gripes with R360 is that, players who align themselves with R360 will not be able to play for the Wallabies, which is, for a lot of players, that's the main reason for even playing rugby, to kind of play for the Wallabies. And so that has kind of been the biggest thing. The agent side of things, I haven't heard too much about how the rugby will be kind of disciplining their agents. But to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if we see, them kind of follow the same route as the NRL, especially because, it does seem to be working in the sense of kind of scaring off agents from R360. Now, again, this doesn't mean that the players have now forfeited their opportunity to play with R360. It just means that they've got to find agents or managers that are willing enough to kind of put themselves into that blacklist per se. So haven't heard too much out of the rugby side of things, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do follow suit.
Now, I did see something on Clarkie's page just regarding Lomax. Apparently, he's speaking to a French rugby agent. Is there much details on that? And do you think it's more so a ploy from him? Like he'll probably still be under the same management, but it's more so just someone else speaking on his behalf so he can talk to Rugby 360? Am I digging a bit too deep here? Is that sort of your thought process? What was your mail on that side of things?
Yeah, so the thing is with Zach Lomax, like again, he can join R360 through a different manager, and his manager has told him by all means go, find different representation and get yourself into R360. He's being offered more money than he ever will in the NRL. Now the whole thing with negotiating with French Rugby, I don't know if that is a case of him wanting to stick by his agent and potentially just look at other options, see how R360 pans out, and then make his decision. Because at the end of the day, he can go to French Rugby and then just come back to the NRL if things don't kind of fall through the way that he wants them to. I don't know how much of a ploy it is. More so, I think he's now keeping his options open. And Lomax is a real interesting one because obviously he left the NRL 1 year into a 4-year contract with the Parramatta Eels. And different to Ryan Pappenhausen, he explicitly said that he's leaving to explore opportunities other than the NRL. So I think now whether he's kind of falling on his sword now and going for second best with French Rugby, or if he's, quite literally just seeing how things go with R360 before kind of committing to that 10-year ban from the NRL, I definitely think that things are definitely up in the air for Lomax. I doubt he even really knows what he's doing at this point.
And I mean, that's really strange, isn't it? I saw that report as well, like just in regards to, him to getting that French Rugby agent and potentially looking at and playing somewhere until that October start. But that's even implying that there's no preseason, that these guys just rock up and play for their clubs. Like that just, for me, seems a little bit sus from a Rugby 360 point. From a French Rugby piece, mate, is it just Lomax that's been linked to a year over there? Is Ryan Pappenhausen in a pretty similar sort of boat if he was to go and play Rugby 360?
Look, by all reports, Ryan Pappenhausen really just does want some time off from professional sport. He's vowed to take a year off professional sport. Now, there's no doubt French Rugby are interested in him. But to be honest, I think almost every sporting code in the world would be interested in an athlete like Ryan Pappenhausen. So he's a freak. We all know that. But he clearly does need some mental time away from the game. And I wouldn't be surprised if, honestly, we see Ryan Pappenhausen just come back to the NRL in 2027 or 2028. I don't know if this is truly just a decision to go over to R360. I think Zach Lomax, this is a little bit more clear cut. He wants to play rugby. Whereas Ryan Pappenhausen, I don't see him going over to French Rugby. I think that if he makes a decision, it'll either be R360 in 11 months from now or the NRL again in 2027. So
you don't think there's too much chance that if Pappy does come back to sport, it might be for a rugby competition or for a French Rugby competition? You reckon it's either R360 or NRL?
I think at this rate it would be, only because I can't see him coming back to any professional sport in a year. Now, if he makes the decision to come back, in a couple of months, if he pulls a Tavita Pangai Jr. from a few years ago and just comes straight back to sport, we definitely could see him kind of opt into an opportunity with French Rugby, but the talks aren't very loud there at all. The main focus is around Zach Lomax, who is keen to kind of keep his fitness up. He's in the prime of his career, whereas Ryan Pappenhausen has struggled with injury. He's struggled with mental battles as well. I think that he really does need this break off from rugby league and from sport in general. So with the perspective that I do see him taking a year off sport, I think it's just R360 or NRL in 12 months from now.
And if Pappy does come back to NRL, do you think that it's going to be Melbourne or is it going to be someone else, do you think?
I can't see him in a Melbourne Storm jersey again. They've got Fa'alongo there, and they are now looking to commit their cap into other places. There have been talks about Tino, obviously. There have been whispers about Keon Kolomatangi potentially as well if they don't land Tino Fasua Malawi. So I think Pappenhausen's time with the Melbourne Storm has come to its end. Now, I'm not ruling it out completely. I just think that by all accounts, like, they have kind of bought into Fa'alongo now, and he's waited long enough. And look, if Ryan Pappenhausen decides to come back to the NRL in 2027, the Perth Bears are coming in 2027, and they are stacked with a war chest of money over there. There has been interest from the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs as well in Ryan Pappenhausen's services. I believe he was a Bulldogs fan growing up. And so there's definitely opportunity for him in 2027. I can't imagine it's going to be with the Melbourne Storm, especially, I think he'll be 28, 29 by then. And I think that they've kind of bought into Farlongo now as their fullback.
Well, there you go. So I think that Ryan Pappenhausen's pretty set, right? It's the year off, and then it's going to be one or the other, Rugby 360 or NRL. From a Lomax piece, it seems to be a little bit more up in the air, though, whether he goes to French Rugby, whether he takes that time in French Rugby, then goes to Rugby 360. Payne Haas is obviously the interesting one, I guess. We're sort of just waiting to see what he does. I think it seems like from all reports he's going to stay at Brisbane, right?
Yeah, so it's been reported that he has kind of let a fellow NRL representative know that he's planning to stay with the Brisbane Broncos. Now, again, take it with a pinch of salt. Anything can change. We've seen, much, bigger backflips from players in recent years. So he could look to make the decision to go to R360. But to be honest, I think some of the gloss is now wearing off in terms of their kind of their pull with the players, especially with agents now unwilling to kind of negotiate with them due to the 10-year ban. And I've seen a lot of people kind of say, the NRL, there's no way the NRL won't welcome Payne Haas back if he doesn't want to. He's a star of our game. And I get all that. But at the end of the day, the NRL does need to set a precedent. And I think they'll come under much more fire if they do backflip on this 10-year ban than if they kind of go through with it. So I think Payne Haas knows that deep down. And look, if he ends up kind of missing out, or if R360 doesn't go as planned, he's stuck with rugby, somewhere else, which would still offer him great money. But I think he loves the Broncos too much to kind of give that away for essentially nothing.
Mate, is there any other NRL players potentially linked that we, I guess, don't know about? I know that the publicised ones are obviously Lomax, Pappy, and Payne. Is there anyone that's been thrown up, I guess, that we don't know about? I know that Jai Gray was thrown up at a stage, but he's obviously re-signed with South now, so that's not going to happen. Anyone else thrown up that we, I guess, don't know about or hasn't been publicised yet from an NRL piece?
Yeah, so and something to take note of is I believe quite a few players have signed non-disclosure agreements over the last couple months to sign with R360. Now, a couple of, I was reported a couple months ago and I spoke about it, that Zach Lomax was said to have signed a non-disclosure agreement, a couple months ago with R360. So there's every opportunity that there have been other players to have signed those NDAs as well. And the R360 is planning to make their first announcement of players over the next week or two. So those players who essentially cannot say anything will probably come to light over the next 7 to 14 days, I'd say. Another major guy is Cameron Munster, who R360 approached, I believe, this week with a 1.5 million per season deal to get him over to R360. Now, I believe Cameron Munster is remaining with the Melbourne Storm for the next 2 years, but again, we could see him make a backflip decision. Do I see it going through? Not really. But they have come to him with a formal offer. Other than that, there hasn't been many, reports come to light. Again, a lot of these players have signed non-disclosure agreements and can get in quite a bit of trouble if that kind of leaks. So I would say that over the next 7 to 14 days, you're going to see NRL players that you hadn't even thought of kind of link up with R360. But to be honest, I think a lot are going to be kind of scared off now by all of these policies and bans put in place.
Okay, so look, let's just sort of clear this up as well. Let's say that Lomax does sign with R360.
Yep.
So his management lose all their NRL clients, or because he's got a new bit of representation now with this French rugby person, if that's eventuated, does that mean that person will lose any NRL connections that they sort of had? What's the story there?
So it would depend on when the contract was signed and obviously which agent was a part of it. So as I said, it was believed that Zach Lomax had signed a non-disclosure agreement with R360 a couple months ago. Now, that was before the NRL had implemented these policies. Now, I don't believe they can implement any punishments on players that had done anything before that. And Zach Lomax's agent said it himself. He said that I have spoken to R360, but that was well before the NRL had implemented these policies. So whether he was the one who orchestrated the deal, if it was before the policies were put in place, he can't be under any legal trouble or be banned from the NRL. Now, if the deal is signed or put together, post that policy being put in, whichever agent has kind of put it together or orchestrated the deal would be banned from the NRL for 10 years. So look, if he's, done it with a new agent, and try, somewhat of a loophole, that agent obviously wouldn't be allowed to kind of link up or do any work with the NRL for the next decade. But his current manager would be sweet to kind of continue working with NRL talent.
That is very, very interesting. And then I guess who is Lomax? Do we know who Lomax's current NRL manager is and who their clientele is?
Yeah, so you're gonna have to. So I actually avoided saying it for a reason, only because I can't pronounce the name.
Yeah.
But he's a former NRL player. I'm gonna try my best here because you have asked. So he's a former NRL player, Clinton Shifkoski, I believe.
That was pretty good, mate. We'll cop that.
So I thought I would actually mess it up a little bit more. So Clinton Shifkoski, he's one of the top agents in the NRL as well. I don't have the list of players that he manages, but two of the highest ones, Ryan Pappenhausen and Zach Lomax. So that's quite telling, and the fact that he's backed out is absolutely huge. And so, look, you think of player agents and the top agents. You obviously think of guys like Isaac Moses and the like, but Clinton's right up there, and he's one of the top agents in the NRL. And for him to back out, he's got a lot of talent in the NRL and a lot of ties with rugby league as well. So for him, it's probably not worth risking essentially his main demographic for two players to go over to R360.
Yeah, I guess that's super interesting. And I guess as well, I think what agents will be looking out for more so than ever is if Lomax signs the contract with the French rugby manager, if he goes over with new representation and signs this deal and that loophole works, you'd imagine that a lot of other players would probably do the same, right? And then go back to their previous management while under that contract.
Yeah, I think the only issue there is the fact that player will now be banned from the NRL. But if they don't care about that, then honestly, it's a great way. But the only issue there is for these players, like for Zach Lomax to link up with a new agent to orchestrate the deal. Essentially, you're going to need that agent for the next 10 years of your career anyways, because to orchestrate any deals moving forward, extensions, anything like that, you wouldn't be able to use your NRL-based agent. So there is definitely loopholes, but again, I don't know how much it would benefit the previous agent, unless there's something kind of some fine print there that can kind of get that agent some sort of benefits, financial or otherwise. But look, it is kind of tricky waters that they're kind of treading on at the moment, and I'll be really kind of keen to see over the next week or two, and I implore everyone to keep your eyes on the socials and on the news and stuff, because there's going to be some players named for R360. They're really keen to get it done before Christmas and maybe even before December. So keep an eye out on that, because I think we're going to see some huge kind of bombshells come over the next couple of weeks.
I think we really will too, mate. I think we really will too. And if these sort of loopholes work, I think that's going to be the big thing. I think the bigger thing is going to be, well, how does PVL react? Now, we know that Peter V'landys has already called Payne Haas. Has that conversation happened? And I guess the outcome of the conversation, right, is that Payne Haas has pulled out. Now, do we know as well, like I asked if the statement from Payne Haas might have been orchestrated by the agent. Do you have a feeling it might have been orchestrated by PVL to sort of discourage other players from making, like, if putting out there openly that Payne Haas is worried about the sustainability and the viability of Rugby 360? Having a star player like that coming out, it's going to deter more so rookies than anything, but just anyone from going out and signing this contract. So do you think it's a ploy more so from PVL to get that statement out there to deter players?
Look, if if there was anyone who would have orchestrated that statement, it would have been Peter V'landys. That is the issues that Payne Haas has found with R360 are the exact issues that V'landys has been preaching over the last 6 months. And look, there is definitely validity to it. I understand there's no guarantee that this competition does go through. It brings the benefits that I guess people are hunting for. But I do definitely think that Payne Haas genuinely is quite concerned, and that's why he was offered the $3 million upfront by R360. He's quite concerned about the commercial benefits of this new competition. There's really not enough around it for these players to really hold on to. Now, obviously, they're backed by billionaires, which is great. But at the end of the day, like, you need commercial success as well. And I think they are quite concerned about that. Now, there has been talk that R360 have aligned themselves with a massive broadcaster in YouTube. There's somewhat of a partnership there as well, which again, another $1 billion backing. It's just that these players don't know enough and they don't feel confident enough that this will actually come off the ground for them to kind of throw away their NRL career where, Payne Haas is not going to make as much in the NRL, but he's going to make quite a bit over the next 10 years.
Oh, I'm sure he will. I'm sure he will. Look, just a quick one as well. Is there any rumours about rugby players linked? Like, obviously from an NRL space, we've got Haas, we've got Lomax, we've got Pappy. Is there any actual names that have been linked from a rugby side that you've sort of seen with Rugby 360 or not?
Yeah, from the rugby standpoint, because I'm mainly NRL, I wouldn't know too much about the rugby side of things. But it actually is quite interesting how, at least in our NRL media, there hasn't been much talk about there being rugby links. I don't know if you've seen the same, but there really hasn't been too much noise. A lot of it's been centered around the NRL. But for Rugby Australia to come out and say that our players cannot link up with the Wallabies should they, link up with R360, I think that is kind of cause for concern that there are players looking at making the switch and potentially being targeted as well. At the end of the day, you don't make threats if there's no threat, in front of you. And so I think the NRL are concerned. I think rugby is concerned as well. And that's why they're kind of putting all these little precedents and policies in place. Yeah. But as for specific names, I personally haven't heard any. But look, again, like if we're seeing NRL players get scouted like this, I'm sure we're seeing stars in rugby as well kind of get targeted by R360.
Mate, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit too. If there is one player that hasn't been named in the media that you sort of look at in their contract situation and go, I think out of everyone that hasn't been named, I think this player is the most likely to be the next guy to have rumours about signing with Rugby 360 and whatnot from an NRL space, who's the player that you'd sort of pinpoint as that guy?
Look, at the moment, there's quite a few players coming off contract, and I am going to go for kind of off-contract players from 2027 onwards because I think that's fair. It's like a lot of these players are under contract. It's not kind of fair to pick them out when they're really not even linked with leaving. But if I'm going to pick a player, I'm probably going to go with a guy like Jaden Campbell, who is obviously off contract at the end of 2026. He's been offered a monster deal by the Gold Coast Titans. They've also been given a mammoth deal by the Perth Bears. I believe it's $6 million over 5 years. He's been offered by the Perth Bears. So he's being offered big money. Hasn't taken up either of the offers just yet, which is, smart business by him and his manager to sit it out and kind of wait out the crowd. But if I'm going to pick any player that hasn't been named and hasn't been linked so far, I'm probably going to go with Jaden Campbell just because obviously he's young. He's definitely, he's a star player. Like everyone knows him, people follow him, people kind of look up to him. And I think that he's one of those players that could be really exciting for R360. Now, again, there hasn't been any official links or anything like that, but I definitely think he could be a guy that they pay a mozza to get and could potentially see him go over there in 2027. I want
to throw two names at you, mate. And I just want to get your thoughts because these are two guys who've been in the media quite a bit lately, and I've seen them on your page as well. First one's Murray Taulagi. Now, I know that he's obviously had a bit of drama with his negotiations at the Cowboys. Is there a chance that maybe Rugby 360 throw a couple million at him to go over to Rugby 360, do you think?
I don't think Murray Taulagi has the star power to command that kind of money. Now, if we look at a guy like Jai Gray, who was offered around $900,000 to go over, I personally think Jai Gray I'd say they're somewhat on the same caliber of player at the moment. You obviously Taulagi has played for Queensland. He does have a little bit more sparkle to his name, but I definitely think that Murray Taulagi will stay in the NRL. More notably, I think he's going to go to the Dragons. So I'd be very surprised if he was one that was kind of thrown up. I can see them offering maybe $1 million a year, which is obviously much more than he would get in the NRL. But I personally think that the deal to the Dragons is close to finishing up. I don't see him leaving the NRL after next year.
Is that the same sort of sentiment with a Ruben Garrick potentially as well?
Ruben Garrick is a different situation. Ruben Garrick, I can definitely see heading over. He's probably got a little bit more versatility. He's a little bit more, I guess. You can sell Ruben Garrick as that kind of star player, and he's by no means locked in to the Manly Sea Eagles at the moment. Now, the Perth Bears are keen on bringing in Ruben Garrick for 2027. That much is clear. The Parramatta Eels have also been quietly hoping to get him over as well. I probably still have him remaining in the NRL, but he's someone I definitely can see heading over to R360 and probably being one of the first to do so. And it should be noted that he hasn't made an NRL decision, and so he could be one of those players who have kind of inked those, non-disclosure agreements or something like that. So he's definitely a player. I think it could be someone who goes over to R360 much more than Murray Taulagi.
And then the last one, mate, and probably would be the biggest bombshell next to Payne Haas, Tino. Is there any chance that he might be signing one of these non-disclosures and having a conversation with Rugby 360 as well?
I doubt it, only because I actually don't think money is what's driving Tino at this point. He really wants to win an NRL premiership. I see Tino going back to the Melbourne Storm. I don't think, I know the Perth Bears are being thrown up to the Gold Coast Titans, obviously offering him a ton of money, and R360 would likely do the same. But I honestly don't. I see him staying in the NRL. He's been very vocal about the fact he wants to win an NRL premiership. I can't see him making a move. And honestly, I see him linking up with either the Melbourne Storm, potentially the Bulldogs, but more likely the Melbourne Storm in 2027. I definitely don't think he stays at the Gold Coast Titans at this rate, but I don't think it's to go over to R360.
Mate, actually, I've actually got one more for you because I just thought of it then, and I think this would have to be probably one of the more likely ones that isn't in the media at the moment. Kalen Ponga.
Yeah, so Kalen Ponga has spoken on multiple occasions. It's been reported on multiple occasions how much that he has kind of been somewhat pulled towards rugby and leaving the NRL. He's by no means happy in Newcastle by everything I've kind of been told. There's been mixed reports, and I've been told by some people in Knights camp that he does want to stay. I've been told by people at other clubs that he wants to go to this club and that club. There's way too much noise around Kalen Ponga. I can guarantee you he's not remaining at the Newcastle Knights past his current contract. Now, whether he goes over to R360, I think that's a definite possibility. And if R360 are willing to pay Ryan Pappenhausen, a mammoth deal of $1 to $2 to $3 million a year, Kalen Ponga could definitely command upwards of that as well. He does want to play rugby at some point in his career. I definitely can see him heading over. Now, whether I see him heading over in their first year, I'm not as certain. I think he does want to give NRL at least one more year before he makes a decision. And he obviously can't play a full 2026 NRL season and then go straight into rugby union. So he's definitely one I can see going over, maybe in 2028 or the back end of 2027, I should say. But probably not for their first year. By all accounts, he does want to give NRL one more go and give Justin Holbrook over at the Knights one more go as well. So I definitely think he's a great shout, and I definitely think we could see him at some point. Maybe not next year, though.
Okay, well, look, we'll have to wait and see, mate. There was actually one more player rumoured to go to Rugby 360. Has there been any further comment from the Billy Smith camp in regards to his conversations?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. So I don't know if I don't believe they've given him a formal offer. I think they've kind of just set their sights on him at the moment. But what a loss he'd be for the Sydney Roosters. He's been an absolute cult hero over there. Now he's contracted with them until the end of 2027. And the emerging league is saying that they would potentially shift their focus away from, Zach Lomax, Ryan Pappenhausen. And one guy we didn't even mention is Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, who has also been linked with R360 as well. and he's also a star that could potentially make his way over. He's spoken about that before. Billy Smith is a guy that has been targeted by them or somewhat identified. I don't think there's been a formal offer pushed forward to him at this rate, but we definitely could see him as well make the move if he gets a bigger contract.
Who do you think's more likely out of the two? Do you think Roger's more likely or Billy to go over to Rugby?
Roger, absolutely. He's kind of hinted at it since. I don't know if you remember. I actually remember the first report I ever put out on R360 was Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, linked with R360, and I think that was about 6 months ago. And I remember putting this up, not even really buying it. Just I've obviously got a report on what comes out. I didn't really buy that, but he's shown that he's not afraid to leave the NRL, and I'm sure he's not afraid to do it again. I definitely think that we could see him make a move, similar to that.
Might be thinking a little bit too hard here, but do you reckon that's why they bought Lofi Khan-Pereira then, the Warriors, just in case?
There's definitely a possibility for that. Look, at the end of the day, I believe they've got Chans out the back now. They've got Tuapiki there as well. They obviously want to strengthen their outside backs, other than their fullback position. Khan Pereira is obviously an immense talent who probably hasn't been utilised properly over at Gold Coast. They could be preparing for life after Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. And don't get me wrong, he's been a good player since he came back to the NRL, but probably not in his Dally M winning form since returning to the New Zealand Warriors. Maybe because he's not playing his usual position of fullback. But look, they definitely, I think, would be open to him leaving. He'd obviously free up a bunch of space, and they have Khan Pereira, who is a little bit cheaper as well. So there's definitely the opportunity for that. The Warriors have been aware for a while now that he might go to R360. And interestingly enough, there hasn't been much talk about it since then, but I definitely see him making the move over there at some point, especially if they're offering him, I believe, around $1 million a year. So I can definitely see him making that move.
Well, look, mate, I'm pretty keen to see because apparently we're going to get some signings as of next week. Yeah. So hopefully by then we have a little bit more clarity as well what teams are looking like. I guess the structure of the competition. You said 6 teams, so keen to see what that I guess looks like. If it's quite a short competition, logos and signing announcements. I think it's what we all want to see, right? We want some clarity as to how this thing is going to work, if it's going to work. And I tell you what. Once we do get some signing announcements and stuff like that, it's going to leave us shaking in our boots. If we get nothing next week, I think it's the best possible thing for NRL. If we do, I think that's what's going to worry people. Isaac, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast again. Hopefully we'll get you on soon as well for some other news around the off-season, but pleasure having you on again, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And let's hope for a bit more good news heading into 2026, but I'm always around, so I'm happy to come on again next time.
Cheers, brother.
Awesome. Thanks.